Hello class, so welcome to the final video of my advanced statistics and probability videos. And in this video, we're going to be doing some exploratory data analysis in Python. So it'll kind of be to wrap up everything we've learned over the last 8 weeks. And yeah, so there's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to breeze through it relatively quickly, but everything will be contained in the PDF to explore further. Um, so the first thing we're going to do is grab the data set and then just kind of try to understand the trends in it so that we can perform more intensified research questions in the following sections. So the data set was grabbed from this link at Kaggle, and it's used to analyze customer shopping trends for an online retail business. So the content in this data set includes all of this listed here, and we have 3,900 rows, and it serves as a foundation for data-driven insights for better decision-making and customer-centric strategies. So the following code is going to do some exploratory data analysis, and this is really just to first clean the data and then print the summary statistics, and then kind of analyze any of the patterns or if we can find any correlations in a heat map, just to see what we can work with here and what we can hypothesize later on. So the first thing we're going to do is clean the data by check for missing values, and then we're going to print the summary of our entire data frame to understand the measures of central tendency as well as the spreads of each of our numerical variables. Then we put everything in a heat map to see if we have anything correlated to each other that we can identify right off the bat. And then we'll look at some of our distributions just to see if there's anything significant right from just eyeballing it. So this is our summary statistics. Our correlation heat map is the following, and as you can see, everything's kind of in the blue here, so there's no strong correlations, right, that we can see at first glance. This is a distribution of the ages of the participants in our survey, so very wide distribution. Seems that it's about normal for each of these numbers, almost identical for each age. Then we look at the gender count, many more men than women in this study. And then we look at the purchase amount by category as well as the purchase amount by subscription status. So from here, we're seeing that the medians look like they're very close together for each category and subscription status, but we can't mathematically confirm anything just by eyeballing it. So that's why we're going to delve into the next task, which is the research questions, correlation analysis, and statistical techniques. So in this task, we're going to identify a couple of questions that we can investigate. So the 4 questions we'll identify are: does the frequency of purchases have an impact on the purchase amount? Are customers who use a promo code more likely to spend more than those who don't use one? Does gender affect the type of item purchased? And is there a correlation between the number of previous purchases and the purchase amount? So let's go over each question briefly. So for question 1, our null hypothesis is that the frequency of purchases has no impact on the purchase amount. An alternative hypothesis, as always, is going to say the opposite, that the frequency of purchase does affect the purchase amount. So then to test this hypothesis, we'll first plot out our box and whisker plots for each of the categories, and then we can use a one-way ANOVA with an F-test to mathematically confirm whether we reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. So we're going to first group all the data by frequency of purchases, and then we'll get the measures of central tendency as well as the standard deviation to understand the spread, and then we'll create a box plot to visualize it, and then check for significant differences by running our one-way ANOVA with the F-test. Now we're going to assume normality in this instance, and what we're going to come to is that we have a p-value of 0.8749, which is much higher above than our alpha level of 0.05. So we can say that we don't have any sufficient evidence to conclude that there's a significant difference in purchase amount among any of the frequency groups. So then the next question we're going to look at is customers who use a promo code. Are they more likely to spend more than those who don't use a promo code, or less likely? So then to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to plot it out in a box and whisker again, and then we can use a t-test since we're comparing means to determine whether or not these two samples are significantly different or not. So as a same kind of concept, we will grab the data that we need and then plot out the measures of central tendency, and then we will print this out, look at our box plots, and then perform our t-test. So we come to the conclusion that, again, the promo code for used versus not used, the medians are very in fact, they're the same. They're both 60. The means are very close together, 60.13 for those who did not use the promo code and 59.28 for those who did use it. So this t-test doesn't provide any significant evidence to conclude that there's a significant difference in spending between those who use the promo code and those who don't. Question number 3 is, does gender affect the type of item purchased? So then to do this, we're going to run as a chi-square test because we're going to test our expected frequencies against our observed frequencies. So the first thing we're going to have to do to get that is get a cross tabulation of gender and item purchased, and that will give us our contingency table to allow us to understand our expected frequencies. And then we can plot this out, and we can see all our expected frequencies. And then we can check whether, by running the chi-squared test, whether or not our observed frequencies are less than or greater than alpha. And if it's less than alpha, we'll say that there's a significant association between gender and the type of item purchased. Otherwise, we'll say that there's not a significant association between gender and type of item purchased. Now, as you can see, we get a p-value of 0.4473, so that would indicate that there is no significant association between gender and the type of item purchased. Now, if you look at these plots, they're all very similar, but you will see that men are a lot more than females, but the reason we account for that is because as we saw up above, there's a bigger percentage of men in our study than there are of women, so we would expect that for each of those frequencies that the frequency for men would be higher than it would be for women. So this doesn't indicate that there's an association just because the men is higher. Then next, our final question for this task is there a correlation between the number of previous purchases and the purchase amount? So as you saw in the heat map, everything was very low, so that's what we're going to expect going into this, but we're still going to run the test to confirm it regardless. So the first thing we can do is plot it into a scatter plot of our previous purchase versus our purchase amount, and then we can calculate the Pearson correlation coefficient by using the Pearson R test. Again, we're assuming that the data is linear here. If we were to be more robust, we would have to check first whether or not it was quadratic, but in this case, we're going to assume it's linear. As you can see, the data is very random regardless, and that our p-value is less than alpha, and we have a Pearson correlation coefficient of 0.01, so we show that our p-value is greater than alpha, and we show that there is no statistically significant correlation. Finally, the next task, what we're going to do is plot a regression model. So we want to understand if we can use any of the independent variables to predict our dependent variable, which is purchase amount. So in this, we want to fit the age, review rating, and previous purchases variables into a regression model, and then understand if we can use that to predict what the purchase amount would be. So to do that, what we do is first we create a pair plot to understand the scatter of our data, and then we can plot the age, review rating, and previous purchases into our X variable, and then you use the purchase amount as our Y variable. Then we fit that to a multiple linear regression model using ordinary least squares, and then we can look at the summary. Then next, we'll look at our residuals to see if it's normal or not, and if it is normal, what we should see is kind of a constant line where the residuals will hover around 0 equally on both sides. So let's just look at the ordinary square least squares results. As you can see, we have an R squared value of 0.001, which indicates that these variables don't really explain anything about, they explain at least a very, very, very small amount of the factors that go into the purchase amount. So even though we were able to plot a linear regression using this, it's not a good indicator of how we can determine purchase amount or at least predict purchase amount in the future. Okay, so finally, let's put all this together in a report, and then we'll come to a conclusion of all our data. So the introduction is we had a data set that is related to customer purchases, and it included demographics, purchase details, and other relevant attributes. We wanted to gain insights into our customer behavior and purchasing patterns. So then we identified 4 research questions. We looked at Does the frequency of purchases have an impact on the purchase amount? Are customers who use a promo code likely to spend more than customers who don't use one? And does gender affect the type of item purchase? And is there a correlation between the number of previous purchases and the purchase amount? And then we came to the following hypotheses for those four questions, which again was the null and alternative hypothesis. One, the null says that there is no difference. The alternative says there is. And then we went through our various methodologies. For the first test, we did an ANOVA. The second test, we did a t-test. The third test, we did a chi-squared. And the fourth one, we did a Pearson correlation coefficient. And then for regression, we used ordinary least squares. And then here are the final results. So again, looking back at question 1, we had a very high p-value for our ANOVA. So that indicates that there is no significant difference in the frequency groups. The second, we had another high p-value for the promo code, and the medians were exactly equivalent. So that means that there is no significant difference to suggest that there's a difference between purchase amount for those who use promo code and those who do not. And test number 3, we used chi-square to determine if there's an association between gender and the type of item purchased. We weren't able to find a significant association there either, since we had a high p-value again. And then in our fourth one, we wanted to see if there was a correlation between the number of previous purchases and the purchase amount. Again, we did not find a strong correlation there. We found a correlation of 0.01, which suggests that there is no correlation between previous purchase and purchase amount. And then lastly, in our regression, we wanted to see if we could use age, review rating, and previous purchases to predict the purchase amount, but those three ended up having a very low R-squared value, which indicates that they aren't good predictors of purchase amount. So in conclusion, this analysis provided important insights into the relationships between various variables in our data set, and these findings can be valuable for businesses looking to understand customer behavior and preferences. While the analysis explored these variants while this analysis explored various aspects of customer behaviors and spending powers, it's evident that there's many unaccounted factors here since we weren't able to find anything significant, and further research and analysis would need to be done to explore other factors into influencing customer decisions. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later. Thank you.